Hey, welcome to the channel. For anyone who's wondered whether specialty coffee beans really are special at all, well, today we're going to find out. First, the contenders. I tested 2 local roasteries against 2 chains and 1 international roastery. The local coffees were purchased the same day, as was the Caribou coffee. I'd purchased the other 2, the Sbux and the Senzu, within the last 3 months and only used them to illustrate my point in the conclusion. Finally, the raw beans. These beans are over 4 months old and are of Colombian origin. If we do the math, the cost per gram of these is 10 times cheaper than the cheapest beans on the contender list. I roast these beans roughly once every 2 weeks at home, and that's an entirely hassle-free process for me. Next, bean testing. I used a simple method. First, I emptied the grinder by grinding every last bit. Next, I'd use equal force to tamp each espresso shot, then I'd simply pull a shot. If the shot matched up with the pressure gauge on my machine, which I completely trust and has given me great results in the past, I included it in the test. So I hope you can forgive my amateurism. I started the test with 2 glasses but switched out to 1 when I found out that it was tough to keep them in place, and I kept a towel underneath just so that they wouldn't move around under the vibrations. So excuse me for that too. The machine I use in this test and the one that I use daily is the Breville or Sage dual boiler. It's a staple of my home and a machine I have no intentions of replacing. If interested, let me know and I'll do an in-depth review. But overall, I'd give it a 5 out of 5. Up first was the home roasted coffee. Coffee tasted great, a little acidity, but nothing more than that. Next were the coffee beans from the first local roastery. Pause. The espresso shot came out great. It was not too acidic and only slightly bitter. I noted in my audio notes to myself how similar the 2 coffees tasted. Slightly acidic, but smooth overall. Next was Toby's Estate, the last of the local roasteries I tried. I believe it's a chain, but the coffees are supposedly roasted in-house. The beans were extremely aromatic, in the best way possible. The surprising thing was how similar the coffee tasted to the other 2. There was a slight fruitiness to this coffee, but I could only tell when tasting back to back with the other coffees. Then I tried the Caribou coffee beans. Caribou is usually hit or miss with me, and this time it was great. Remember, for all the coffees that I tested, I asked the shopkeeper specifically for espresso grade coffee, and that's what I got. The beans were easy to pull espresso shots from, and here you can tell the espresso is slightly creamy, a good sign in my opinion, but not as good as the previous beans. There's a slight bit more wateriness in the Caribou beans, but the final product was surprisingly just fine. Now I do want to be fair to the Sbux coffee here, as well as the Senzu coffee. They were older, but I used them to illustrate a point. These older coffees were near impossible to draw a decent shot out of. No matter how fine, coarse, how much or how little coffee I ground, the results were always similar. Watery coffee that was quite bitter. I really did not enjoy it at all. I did lose the footage to the Senzu beans, but the results were too similar to the Sbux beans, albeit slightly less watery. So to conclude, I know many people claim to be able to taste each and every hint of flavor out of their own coffee, and all the power to them. Now if there's a coffee that does something magical to your taste buds, I say keep buying it and keep doing what makes you happy. And sometimes that alone is really worth the premium, and I'm not trying to shoot any of that down. But if you're like me, and good coffee to you is fresh, tasty, coffee-tasting coffee, then here's my recommendation. At 1/10 the price of the cheapest beans, the raw beans output was just fantastic. In fact, it leaves room for experimentation and personalization in the roasting process too. Now, in my opinion, most coffee beans taste about the same, with some a little bitter, some a little more acidic, and so on and so forth. I'd be skeptical of anyone who could discern distinct flavors consistently in their coffee and who wasn't a trained expert. I've tried it before and I just don't think that the average drinker can tell difference at the higher levels, but I think we can all tell a good coffee from a bad one. Which leaves me with my final conclusion. Every time I've purchased fresh beans, I've ended up with amazing coffee. And every time I've purchased old beans, the outcome is a watery, bittery coffee. I really do believe that the biggest takeaway here is to make sure that any beans you use or are drinking from are as fresh as can be. I think that'll make the biggest difference in your coffee experience. And if you don't want to pay a ton for incredible coffee, just roast them at home. I cannot stress how much of a difference it's made in my own coffee experience. I used to buy coffees from all over looking for that perfect bean. And once I started roasting my own, I found a new world where all I had to do was heat some beans and they would taste incredible, regardless of where I bought them from. Thank you guys for watching. If you found this useful, please give it a like. And if you have any questions, just leave them in the comments.